Yeah, Rick, us guys with daughters, I've got four myself.
Mm.
We will tend to, listen to our daughters sometimes. You had a daughter that said, "I want you to go see this lady." What was your anticipation? In full honesty here, were you expecting much different from Susan?
You know, well, for starters, that's a great question. I felt I owed it to my family to say, oh yeah, fine. I mean, I don't want to have surgery. I
Okay.
just think I've exhausted everything. For instance, I think my first response might have been, well, honey, I've done physical therapy, and she's
Yes.
no, 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 Dad. This is different. This is something called the McKenzie method. I don't really know anything about it, but I've heard great things about Susan Wood, so I think you ought to call and go see her. Um, so I don't know that I had high expectations, but boy, I was still willing to do something that would avoid surgery.
Yeah, fantastic. All right. Susan, thanks for being patient and listening
Yeah,
to Rick's story again. You know it
absolutely.
well, but I appreciate that. Talk to us a bit about Rick's initial presentation, mostly his history, before we even get into what you found in the physical exam. Share with us what you heard from him and maybe compare it to your experience now that you've used this system for a while. What did you first learn from Rick, and what did it mean to you?
Well, for one, he'd been told a lot of different things, right? And he'd gone through PT, he'd gone through chiropractic care, injections. I mean, so my first thought was, this has got to be different from what he's experienced in the past because he's failed everything else in the past, right?
Hmm.
And he had been told specifically not to do certain things. So I knew that I needed to be really careful and ask permission, right? So, what was interesting about his symptoms, and Rick, you can correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, but when we think of spinal stenosis, we do think, okay, sitting is, you feel good when you sit. Walking, you don't feel good, and oftentimes it's in your extremities, right? Walking and standing are problems. So in that sense, it really did match up, right? I mean, he could get almost immediate relief when he sat. Um, but he also didn't feel good bending over either. He mentioned like brushing my teeth, doing the dishes, stuff like that. And that's generally not as much of an issue as well with the stenosis. So, um, and knowing that his doctor was like, you're going to need a laminectomy, you're going to need some type of surgical intervention. I had to be careful with how I presented this idea of moving and having him move in all directions, right? So I remember asking you, Rick, like, well, when I assess you, I'm going to need you to move in every direction. So if it's okay with you, I'm going to need you to go in that backwards position. And what struck me is that, I mean, he had zero movement, and he almost had like a forward, kind of a slight forward lean, like he was saying his walk was affected, his posture was affected. It just didn't look natural to stand comfortably for a guy who, this is the other strange thing, this, he was very active guy, right? Doing Pilates, playing tennis, playing golf, and for him to be pain free and then have this instance where it turns on that quickly and then it manifests itself in symptoms into his legs. You kind of question, like, why did this stenosis all of a sudden kick in?
Hmm.
Right. Like, that's strange. um so I to me it was an opportunity to kind of stay curious, right? And say, like, hey, let's just see what we find, because sometimes as we start to move you, your symptoms might change. And that was where essentially I was hoping to see if we could elicit some type of change and be open to that.
Hmm. So I heard you say, Susan, that because he was somewhat kyphotic, meaning slightly forward bent, unable
Mm-hmm.
to fully be
Yeah.
erect and standing and have that natural curvature and that arched position of the lumbar spine, and the fact that he felt limited in that way when you asked him to move that way, that at least opened the potential that, okay, perhaps if we can move Rick in this direction and it improves or doesn't worsen, it might open up an opportunity that there's some answers there, particularly since all the care before that had not really explored that direction.
Yeah, I mean, I think with with a lot of the back pain that we see these major limitations in certain directions, right? And he had no limitation bending over that I can recall, and just an extreme limitation in that direction. So in my mind, it's worth it to at least explore. And I knew I didn't have a lot of, I knew it was going to be like, we either needed to like figure something out kind of quickly, or we had 30 days really from the time that he was going to be deciding on a surgery or not. So I just remember on the first visit, just the idea of standing up erect turned on his glutes. And so I basically started him out in a prone position, which did trigger his symptoms into the glutes. But it eventually started to calm down, so I was kind of able to sneak in some movements, not in a way that I didn't want to be, I wanted to feel like he was comfortable moving in that direction, but I also wanted to confirm, like, is this something I can help? So I needed to know, can I get you to move in this direction without it being an irritant?
Hear the entire episode for free on iTunes, Spotify, other favorite podcast players, or go to mechanicalcareforum.com.